The play that I had the pleasure of choosing and reading was The Last Witch by Rona Munro. Now, The Last Witch follows the historical accounts of a real woman named Janet Horne, who was the last woman to be executed for witchcraft in Scotland. So knowing that this was based off of a real woman makes the play all the more powerful. In the beginning of the play, we're left with the information that we're in Dornoch, Scotland, in the summer of 1727, with Janet Horne's neighbors merely suspicious of her cursing cattle and practicing witchcraft. What intrudes this, though, is the arrival of Captain David Ross, who comes to the village because he's heard the complaints and seeks to officially inspect and investigate Janet for witchcraft, which ultimately leads to some unfortunate events. But what makes this specific play and the way it plays out unique, the unique factor, is Ross investigating witchcraft and looking to accuse actively, and Janet's refusal to conform for a moment to ease suspicion, because instead she taunts Ross and the others with her power and ability to conjure, rubbing in her nonconformity in their faces. Our central character, Janet, wants to protect her daughter Helen and live freely without social scorn and oppression. That is her one desire in this show. And the obstacles standing in her way are Ross and his authority, as Janet personally attacked his past, enraging him to convict her with no real concrete evidence. So she put herself in this horrible position just to not give up to conformity and to stick up for her uniqueness, and majority of the town coming together through rumor and accusation to support her execution ultimately leads to her demise. Now, when it comes to exposition for The Last Witch, there's various examples of indirect and direct, but what I found was the most prevalent and prominent, starting with indirect, is through analyzing and witnessing Janet and her daughter Helen's relationship, especially considering that Helen was born with a disability. Her hands and her feet are clawed, so her one desire is to conform and to fit in. Yet her mother completely goes against this in nature because she prioritizes her flamboyant, ritualistic behavior and talk, and it's easy to infer that Helen is often embarrassed by her mother because of this, because it goes against all of her desires. But none of this is directly stated. It's behavior that's inferred because you can see it actively happening throughout the play. An example of direct would be Janet's neighbors, especially Douglas and Niles, speaking of the hexes and miracles they have witnessed Janet perform, speaking of her reputation to others as an outsider and witch, and presenting the stasis of the play, because this is all stated very early on. The role that family relationships plays in this play is so incredibly crucial into understanding it, because Janet and Helen's mother-daughter relationship is just crucial to the story, because although Helen can be embarrassed at times by her mom's nonconformity, she has her back and puts her life on the line by attempting to confess to witchcraft before Janet can, but ultimately Janet confesses due to securing Helen's safety, because that's her one want, that's her one desire. And even then, although the two have their differences, they're each other's most precious possession, and I think that's what this play teaches, is that even in the end, although that they both have different opinions on different things, they're willing to sacrifice themselves for each other because their bond is just that strong. Easily the most theatrical moment in the play is Janet's execution, eventually, as it possesses the most action, with her sitting in a barrel for all of town to see, about to be set on fire, with people shouting. Janet and her best friend, Elspeth, are back and forth, trying to comfort each other, and the scene's emotional impact and tension is significant because it demonstrates society's rejection of individualism and nonconformity. Without any concrete evidence, Janet was executed for her knowledge and her differences. And that leads into the themes of the play, which are society's need for conformity and fear of the unknown, because anything that can't be explained or contradicts anything that was previously stated just freaks everyone out, and that makes them turn on each other. which leads into the final theme being the power of knowledge versus authority. You have Ross and you have Janet, somebody who has so much power when it comes to what she knows and what she cares about. And then we have Ross, who just needs to serve the law. When it comes to imagery in the play, two things that I immediately think of are the wind and a crow, because Janet constantly refers to her relationship with the wind throughout the story as it carries her, representing her free spirit and untamability. Additionally, the crow is also a possible image because from the very beginning of the play, Janet exclaims that she wants to shapeshift into a bird and fly free, which makes Ross's death, eventually, at the end of the play so significant because he ends up being swarmed by a flock of crows. And perhaps this represents Janet's revenge. But the title of the play, being The Last Witch, helps us understand the play because in Scotland, Janet was the last witch to be executed. However, it can go deeper than this because the title also begs the question, was Janet really the last witch? I mean, society still discourages nonconformity, which will always exist, so really there is no last witch. People just became better at hiding their differences. Three of the most prevalent forwards I found in the play were Douglas's initial argument with Janet at the beginning, serving as a forward for following events of the play because it sets the play for the rumors and complaints being made about Janet all over the village, foreshadowing a problem becoming of that. And another would be Ross's arrival, as the second he's introduced, stasis is disrupted, as he's an authorial figure joining the ensemble, foreshadowing Janet getting into some real trouble with the law. And lastly, something that I really thought stuck out when it came to moving the story along was Janet mocking Ross and challenging his authority, as it leaves the audience with a feeling that she's not going to get away from that unscathed, and there will be repercussions. Concluding this beautiful story and this breakdown, the new stasis that eventually is established at the end of the play is a still, quiet, and full of fear village of Dornoch, as authority has proven its power and no one will dare to demonstrate nonconformity, which brings us back to the title of Janet being the last person to be brave enough to show nonconformity. She is the last witch.